Welcome to In Front of Ira.
We're Sabrina
and Torsten.
Two historians.
And friends.
And lovers.
Of romantic comedies.
This is the podcast in which we answer the age-old question.
Will they or won't they?
Is it or isn't it a romantic comedy?
Technically, that's two questions.
I can't do this with you right now, and this is also why we have a guest today.
Right. Indeed we do. It is Marisa Kabas, who is basically jumping in this part of the emergency broadcast system up in Front of Ira to talk with us about a very special thing. But before we do that, why don't you introduce yourself, Marisa?
Sure. I'm very excited to be the first guest on this podcast. This is so cool. Hi, I'm Marisa Kabas. I'm an independent journalist based in New York, Brooklyn, New York. I write mostly about really horrifying things, but I love romantic comedies, and I'm really excited to have something fun and cute to talk about for once.
It's kind of what we're doing this whole podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, amen.
And the thing we're talking about today is not like a traditional romantic comedy film. We're actually going to talk about this little clip that is going viral. But I mean, we sort of knew it was going to go viral when it was finally going to come out, which is Amelia Dimoldenberg's chicken shop date with Andrew Garfield. And yeah, I think we've all become slightly obsessed with 10 minutes of this interview and their backstory. And yeah, I don't know, like Marisa, what got you into this?
Sure. Well, should I give a little backstory?
Oh, yeah. Great.
It is? Because especially in this, I feel like maybe in Europe, it's more well known, but like in New York, in the States, it's just becoming like really popular. Like Amelia is becoming like maybe a household name. But essentially, so Chicken Shop Date is Amelia Dimoldenberg. She's this woman in London, and she interviews different celebrities in a fried chicken shop, literally. And it's a really simple conceit, but the thing that makes it so amazing is that she's an incredible interviewer, and she manages to get these really famous people to be really uncomfortable and vulnerable. And she's like the best flirt I've ever seen in my whole life. And so she does red carpets also. And so she's met a lot of celebrities that way. And so she's had a couple of run-ins with Andrew Garfield over the years. And the chemistry was just, I mean, swoon. And we finally got their chicken shop date. So it was a long time coming, and I kind of can't believe it finally happened.
Yeah, it was a very it kind of came out of nowhere. It was a long time coming, but then it was teased for only like a week or two. She's been making the rounds in the States lately, going on all kinds of TV shows. She went on Seth Meyers and just kind of promoting her show, promoting herself. And then Andrew Garfield has been making the rounds, promoting the movie he did with Florence Pugh, We Live in Time, which that's also been a slight viral sensation. Their chemistry is also pretty good, especially in interviews. And yeah, so this is kind of a combination of two viralities, I guess.
Yeah, that's actually interesting that you mentioned the timing of it, and I wonder how much that had to do with it.
Yeah, like, so I feel like in the last, like, the discourse is so fast online, like everyone was freaking out about it, like, not even 2 days ago, and then less than a day later, people are already being cynical about it, and like, you know, this is fake, he's promoting a movie, and we're like, we're not all completely stupid, but what I do think is that the difference obviously is he's not like faking it with Florence Pugh. Like, I mean, usually we all know the promo campaign for movies where it's insinuated the actors probably had an affair, or we're supposed to believe that at least, like, sort of what are we, the toying with this idea, like we saw this with Bridgerton, with Nicola Coughlan and, oh God, what's his name? Yeah, but that was like one of the most recent memory where it's pretty obvious that that's also what it was, and they were having fun with it, which is fine. But like a lot of fans were like very interested in this, and I'm not saying this doesn't happen here, but I think the difference definitely is that they're playing on like Amelia and Andrew's previous like run-ins on the red carpet that also went viral, and that people like know there's a history between those two. And I'm sure he's promoting his movie and this is why this is happening now. But I think there's still something a bit different than going on than two co-stars in the same movie doing this.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, I mean, they've been having these run-ins on the red carpets for a couple of years now. So this took a really long time to come together. And she just dropped the promo the other day. Honestly, I think the promo was better than the actual date.
It was pretty good. It was just it kind of made you feel like one of the movie trailers where they put in the best moments and you're like, this is gonna be so good. And I'm like, it's not like it wasn't good. It was really good. And I actually like weirdly thought it was better the second time I watched it. When you kind of get away from, oh, I just want to watch this thing, to like, I'm trying to figure out what actually goes into the editing and into the storytelling that's part of this whole thing, and kind of like deconstructing what is real, what is not real, this whole like meta thing that they have going on. And I appreciate it more on the second watch, which I'm not sure how you feel about that, the both of you.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because the first watch I was just kind of like, what's coming next? What's coming next? Like, I was so nervous. I was nervous for them. And the second time, you're like, I noticed that he was really trying hard to get the best of her. He was trying to trip her up on her job, which actually kind of annoyed me a little bit when I'm thinking about it, because it's like she's so in control of that space. Like, that is her realm, that is her world. And he wanted to like get her to break because he's special and is in his eyes and her eyes and the eyes of fans. But he couldn't really do it. He tried really hard, and she was, she's a little flustered, but she's always a little flustered. It's kind of part of the whole bit. But I was just really impressed that she didn't just fully like melts in his hands. Like, she's really good at her job.
Yeah, the thing that I noticed was also the way that she did it. Like the whole, there's this moment in it, kind of like the most, I guess, viral moment in it when he at some point says like, it's called flirting, Amelia, when they kind of like diss each other in that like very loving way. And that's the thing that she does constantly in her other chicken shop interviews. If you watch the one with Paul Mescal, for example, it has like some of the same story beats, even down to, you were nominated for an Oscar, you didn't win. So like this is clearly a format that is established and that knows what it is, and that has like set pieces that come up again, like Snog, Marry, Avoid, which is, I had never heard that variant before of this game, which I'm not entirely sure if she also changed it to meet this special moment. Who knows? But all of these things are very carefully crafted, and the editing is just so good, because it sometimes just cuts away like a tiny like fraction of a second too early, where you think there was something still coming, but it's very much on purpose, and then it just cuts to the chicken shop employee who just stands there. It's really, really well structured, which I think is kind of the thing that also has people going, oh, this is the best romantic comedy to come out in 2024, because like the structure and the beats are kind of inspired by that.
I wonder what you think. To me, it kind of feels like a trailer for their relationship.
Yeah, I think that the cutting, like the editing of it, is also trying to make us think, and I mean, it can't be true. This is again, like, we simply don't know that there was conversation clearly that would have delved away from, like, that would have went away from her usual format, and that would have been the moments where she like actually sort of broke, and they had a more serious conversation, but then we cut off. And that might have happened, and it might have not had happened, but that's kind of the thing. And I think what also sells this so well is, like, obviously now people have seen, and if you hadn't seen them before, you probably found them now, like the red carpet moments that were clearly not scripted. Like, as much as this piece is clearly scripted and this is her show and she's in control of also the final cut of it and everything, like the red carpet stuff felt pretty genuine because it very likely was. I mean, you don't script your red carpet, like you sure you come in with interview question, but like she couldn't have known like he was gonna actually come up and like what they were actually gonna discuss, and then there's a whole awkward conversation that they had twice.
Yeah. And she gets one question out, which he then immediately kind of like dismisses, where you're always playing religious guys. And he's like, that's not a question. And like, yeah, sure. This was the one question I actually had for you. And like, this is not how it's supposed to usually work on these interviews. And we just kind of messed it up there in the most glorious way.
I mean, I think there is something, we know there's something special about this particular relationship and this particular date because it transcends the show. I mean, there are people who did not know about this show, I think, a few days ago, who do now and are fully invested. In fact, I mean, I was been looking forward to this, but my best friend had never heard of Chicken Shop Date. She didn't know Amelia. She obviously knows Andrew Garfield. And I gave her the very quick rundown of all the players and the format. She is invested. She is so excited for them. She said she was watching the trailer, the preview, like squealing. And it's just them looking at each other. But it's amazing how powerful just like a couple of glances at each other. And it's like, are we just really conditioned from seeing romantic comedies to be like, that means they're in love? I don't know.
Yeah. I think some of this really is just kind of like the tropiness of a romantic comedy. But like Sabrina and I, the last movie that we discussed was Anyone But You, starring Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney, which also famously had one of those like flirty relationships in the interviews where everybody thought they were having an affair. Like everybody who was supposed to think that they were having an affair thought that, and nobody else did. But they clearly kind of availed themselves of that kind of like trope in romantic comedies. And then the thing that we discussed most when it came to that movie was that the chemistry kind of seemed off in Anyone But You. It just never seemed to quite gel. And in other romantic comedies, when they're good, sometimes it's not that they're especially well directed, that they're especially well written. It's that the chemistry works and you could just put the camera on these two people and their reaction. So like the whole genre also just kind of lives on how do people react to each other in this kind of elusive idea of chemistry.
Yeah, I haven't seen Anyone But You, but I was listening to your How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days episode. And I personally love that movie. I'm sorry.
Maybe we need a reassessment.
Like there's so many we completely swoon about and love you from the one episode where we really like I personally really hate the movie. Not a good representation.
No, I appreciate a strong opinion. I have very strong opinions. Like, for example, I mean, we're going off topic, but like The Notebook, I hate The Notebook. I hate that movie. People live by that movie. So, I appreciate a strong opinion. But just to say, in How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, I feel like their chemistry is pretty great. And that's part of what makes it, like, it is a very silly premise. The whole conceit is ridiculous, but like watching them together is enjoyable. And I think it makes sense. And so I think there's something about Amelia and Andrew that feels really natural, that like you said, that on the red carpet you can't fake that. But I wonder, it's taken so long for them to go on this date. Like, how long is it going to take for them to roll out an actual relationship? Or is that ever going to happen? I don't know.
Yeah, and I love that. Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, we all know there's sort of, I mean, he also stresses he's very private in his private life, also a sentence. But also the fact that it was announced that he had split up from his previous partner within 24 hours of the episode coming out.
Well, no, it became public. Like, that's a different thing. Yeah.
Like, that's what I mean. So this is where he has control over this, because this is clearly what then the publicist and the agents put out into the world, that the straight relationship has ended. It feels very intentional that this is when it was announced, because I think I Googled like his previous partner and she had said, oh, we had broken up months ago. Like, this is just when we tell the world. And it's like, okay, you tell the world the chicken shop date. And obviously people were like, okay, so the chicken shop date went well. And I mean, it's still possible because we all know like these things are filmed also ahead of time. And so we don't know when they film chicken shop and, so I feel like this is also very fun because everyone is now like, ooh, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Are they soft launching their actual relationship with this? Like, yeah.
There's a very interesting thing about the kind of metatextuality of this whole thing, because she also was on all these interviews, and I think it was on Drew Barrymore, where she said she felt pretty good about herself because she kissed someone today. And I'm like, what is the timing of this? Is this meant to be, oh, were they in the same place? Did they do this? It obviously wasn't in London, so it wasn't that day that they filmed it, but did it launch the relationship? And the fact that they then said both, they're very private, it would be completely unsurprising for them to do this, drop this, milk it, and then just basically be in a relationship for half a year and nobody knows. Like, it's entirely believable. Also entirely believable that chemistry works on screen and it doesn't work off screen. Like, there's so many references where Andrew Garfield points to the cameras and kind of like the fakeness of the situation, which, I mean, that's kind of a staple of Chicken Shop Date generally, because it's such a weird conceit. But it's entirely possible that it might not work with the cameras off them when they really just kind of talk about deep things. And, like, if this was like a Before Sunrise situation, would we get Before Sunrise, or would we just get people who don't have anything to say to each other anymore after an hour?
Yeah, and it's the speed and the tension that they maintain the whole time. That's impossible to maintain in a regular relationship. Like, imagine the two of them sitting at home on the couch trying to decide what they want to watch on TV, and they're having this whole back and forth about like, oh, well, what did you mean by that? Like, oh, I think you really, and it's like, that sounds exhausting, honestly. And so it's like, at what point is this really just good chemistry and good for publicity for both of them? It is hard to imagine what a real relationship would be like between the two of them. Like, would either of them ever relent? Would either of them ever let the other one like actually get a win? It seems like they're both very concerned with being like the victor in an interaction.
I think the thing that it also reminded me of, like, was not specifically like movie or romantic comedies, because also this is episodic, right? This is essentially episodic, like the various meetings that they have, but kind of like the classic TV will they, won't they? And that can usually is answered with a will they, but sometimes can be won't they? So that's also just a possibility. It's just kind of the storyline. And there was a piece in Vulture, I think, where somebody basically called this the culmination of a storyline, right? Like a storyline that Amelia Dimoldenberg puts out there as part of her kind of media empire, I guess. And that rang very true to me, because like whatever happens now is a different storyline. It's the Mad About You after When Harry Met Sally, basically. If that happens, and if that's interesting to anyone to see, I don't know. And the other thing that struck me was this kind of thing, this kind of like parasocial thing. I've seen this before on like TikTok with creators that meet each other, and like in one case, I think it was like Yuval Ayame. That was a whole big thing on TikTok a couple of months ago, and there was like even a third wheel, like there was like a triangular like love triangle situation going on, and people were invested. And then they dropped like a podcast episode where they just sat there and kind of like in a similar vein talked, and then it kind of fizzled out from that, because that's as far as goes. Like a lot of times when you hit, the kiss at the end of the movie is the most interesting part. Everything else isn't interesting to us anymore. So like if they soft launch a relationship, is anyone really going to care?
I mean, look at like Taylor and Travis. Like, I mean, people are still very much invested in Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. I'm not saying they're not, but I feel like that the high point was still when it was new, or people were still like, is this happening? Is this happening? Is this actually happening? It's like that they also had a whole narrative that was clearly constructed, and they seem to genuinely also be dating, because people have said maybe it's a PR relationship. We will probably never fully know, but I assume they're actually dating. But obviously, the way they're putting it out into the world, there's a narrative there, and it starts with him making friendship bracelets for her, which might have been the genuine part of it, right? We just don't know, but we like to believe that this is the genuine part. It goes on, and it was certainly the high point when she started showing up to his football games, and obviously won the Super Bowl, and like all of this stuff is happening. He keeps showing up at a concert, and now it's like they're together, and obviously they will milk this for a long time. They both think he's clearly trying to transition into the entertainment industry. It's going on, but I still feel like the sizzling point was clearly this whole will they, won't they, and then the first interactions, the first few times they sort of did things in public that people could have done, right? So
yeah, I mean, to answer your question from before, I will be interested in dating. I will be watching, but I think they're also going to be just under such an intense microscope that it might be really hard to actually make it work unless they really are able, like they said, to be so private and to really have a private life away from cameras. But I feel like now that this has, like I said, transcended the show and it's just a big entertainment story, like internationally, I think the video is like 5 million views already.
Which is like more than double her subscriber base. So like everyone who subscribed watched it, and like 3 million more people, or like people like us who watched it more than once, obviously.
And the impressive thing is that obviously it was able to connect with people who had no context for it. So you watched it and you were like, who is this girl having this incredible chemistry with Andrew Garfield, like one of the biggest stars right now? And I don't know. I selfishly want them to have like British Jewish babies and, just be the British Jewish poster child couple. They're so cute. But I don't know, because like she said, she made a good point in the date. She said, "Did you ever hear of me going out with anyone?" And, not that I know of. I mean, I don't read British tabloids or anything. I don't know if they follow her, but I don't know anyone who she's dated.
The only person that I've heard, like, I'm not deep into this. I don't follow the British tabloids either. But I think one of the rappers that was on her early chicken shop dates, she actually went out with for a while. So like there is actually kind of like a precedent of like the realness of this date. Kind of honestly not sure about much of that relationship. Like I started tuning into chicken shop date like maybe like 2-3 years ago. I think the first one I saw was Charlie XCX, which is a completely different energy. But I think there is something about the people being British on this show that makes it work. Like there's a certain kind of humor, and Amelia Dimoldenberg talked about this. I think it was on Seth Meyers or one of those shows. The way that British people flirt differently from Americans. That British people just kind of like lightly insult each other, and that is kind of what works for this format.
Yeah, I guess most of the guests are British. She's had some Americans.
Yeah, like.
I just watched Sabrina Carpenter, and like, I mean, I have my opinions on Sabrina Carpenter, but it was definitely like the guest is too American in their sensibilities. Like they had a really nice moment where they cracked each other up about like, things, oh, you can't say like hate pussy, but it's again, there's no, you can't say this usually if you're in the UK more than in the US, Sabrina, like, but it still feels like the format, like now that she's become, like Amelia has become so famous and the show has garnered this kind of following, she will get more famous guests. And that feels like it's the usual thing where it's like, can it maintain what kind of makes it interesting and special? If she's sort of like, she's not obligated, I'm sure she still chooses her guests carefully, but like Sabrina Carpenter is clearly like also the flavor of the moment in so many ways. So she wants to get these guests on because it will get more views. And can she maintain that style also? I don't know if she's come out as queer. Like, I mean, if this is supposed to be a date, you know what I mean? Like Sabrina Carpenter, I think, is straight. So it's like, is this still a date? Like, isn't the conceit that this is a date? Like,
yeah, that's
and just shifting it back to it being like an interview format, like.
Yeah, that was always a question too. Like that when there are women on the show, like what does date mean? Because I remember wasn't Billie Eilish? I think she did, and that was another one where people were like their chemistry, like or just the way that they handled the interview, like they were both just really good at it. But it was like, what does a date mean to Amelia?
Yeah, and just kind of like adding to that, when she had Jennifer Lawrence on, who I think is one of the few Americans who really kind of gets the sensibility of these kinds of things. But she talked about her husband, and it's like, yeah, she has a husband. We know she has a husband. They've been married for 5 years. This isn't anything new to anyone, but you're kind of like, letting us look behind the curtain there. Like you're exposing the unrealness. And I think for me, the best chicken shop dates have always been the ones where somebody kind of hints at the fakeness, but goes with it. It feels like kind of like an SNL sketch. Like if they're trying not to break, that's funny. If they're all full on breaking and the sketch is over, that's no longer funny. So to me, that's kind of like the line that you always have to walk.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like you were saying, that Amelia is becoming a celebrity in her own right. And she's making herself the story in a way that she hasn't in the past. And yeah, I don't know if that's ultimately going to be good for her show and what she does, because, whoever comes after Andrew, like the pressure of that, how could you possibly follow that up? No one's going to think it's as good. And then it's going to be like, oh, this girl, Amelia, who is maybe dating Andrew Garfield, interviewed this person so-and-so. It's not about the date. It's not about the guest. It's actually, now it's become about Amelia. And it feels like the power dynamic has shifted.
And what I think would intrigue me before this came out, so like having sort of followed the red carpet things and like, oh, they have amazing chemistry, I want them to date, and like getting invested in them. It was also a bit the dynamic of like, he's a famous movie star and she's sort of the underdog, or at least she's the self-made woman who's like doing red carpet interviews. So clearly there is that hierarchy. It's like the Notting Hill thing, right? She's Hugh Grant in Notting Hill. And if she's suddenly like, I obviously wish her all the best. And I think it's great that she like made it to this point. But then again, that shift sort of the dynamic behind everything, even though we realistically know this is her show and she's the one with the final say. But like it might remove some of that. And like if they're actually dating, I'm still absolutely rooting for them. But like this is where the shit happens right before. It's like, oh my God, it's a fantasy of everyone on, like meeting this famous movie star, even though you're sort of in the industry, but you're like only a journalist, or I mean.
Wait, oh my God. That's why I love this. It's like Notting Hill.
It is.
Notting Hill is like maybe top 3 romantic comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing
discussion.
Yeah, but the thing I think, the way that you just said that, Sabrina, like to me, it's like the dynamic works if she's Hugh Grant in Notting Hill meeting Julia Roberts. The moment she becomes Hugh Grant, like as Hugh Grant meeting Julia Roberts, like that's just two famous people meeting each other, and like good luck to them. But like the kind of like the weird like off-center meeting of the worlds, kind of like the very typical trope of like people from two different worlds meeting, that kind of goes away and becomes less interesting that way. Not that it maybe is as a whole less interesting. I don't know what the next act is for this story, but it certainly is a very interesting story across multiple episodes and multiple media. The one thing that I was thinking about with this, and also when you mentioned Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and all of these things, it used to be that Hollywood publicity was very much controlled and contained. And in especially like the golden era, you don't have social media. You don't have like movie stars being able to go out and kind of like define these things for themselves in any way. There are very scripted stories. There are lies that are put out about people's backgrounds. And today people don't want that anymore. And like, it really struck me when people started looking closer into kind of like the official PR story of where Sydney Sweeney is from and what her like, you know, what she did and where she went to school and all that, and finding that it's just not true, that there are just parts of it that don't line up. And in the 70s, like in the 50s and 60s, nobody cares. That's the story you put out. That's the image of the person you put out. But today, it's too easy to find out whether it's true or not. And it becomes part of the PR that you need to present this different version of authenticity.
Did either of you see Andrew Garfield reading that Modern Love excerpt? Modern Love is a New York Times feature, and it's people share true stories about their own personal love stories. And he was on their podcast recently, and he was reading an excerpt from, you know, someone else, and he was so overcome with emotion. He started crying reading this like kind of love letter that this man wrote. And it was just, I don't know, I'm like, is this all part of the same cinematic universe? Are they trying to turn him into this like really soulful, loving partner while they're launching this relationship with Amelia? Like, is this his next phase? It all feels like they're flooding the zone because he is promoting a movie, but this is the most I've seen him everywhere, probably ever.
This whole, and I do think, and I especially with this topic, I don't think he's milking this on purpose. I'm not that cynical, but like his mother died. And like there was also a very viral interview with, I think, Stephen Colbert. There's also another one where he kisses him we should talk about for a second. But there's like this, when, you know, like he also is very emotional talking about the grief of losing his mother. And I mean, that's come up again now and also this week. And part of this whole promo, I think he went on Sesame Street with Elmo and talked about grief. And I do think that is a very genuine part of himself, but that is also like one of those things where you like sort of, this is also something that people have in their minds now about him being very in touch with his emotions, at least, and being the sort of person that talks about these topics and like grief as a topic and like love and grief and so on. And I think that is definitely also something that has, at least he has embraced as part of his public persona. So that's interesting.
I feel like the Andrew Garfield lore has just expanded rapidly in the last week. Like I've thought about him more than I ever have before.
Yeah. More than ever during the time that he was the only Spider-Man. Let's put it that way. The thing that actually struck me about like this kind of maybe being part of a branding exercise for him is partially the breakup, because the woman that he was with, I don't remember. She has a doctorate. That's the only thing I remember about her. But when kind of asked on her, I think, Instagram, why did you guys break up? And somebody commented that it's because Andrew Garfield wasn't like a political radical, and she seems to be like a radical leftist or like has very strong opinions about politics, and he was not kind of keeping up with that. And so she basically just kind of like replied to that and put like a check mark there and like, yep, that's the reason. And like adding to that, kind of like knowing what I know about Andrew Garfield, working with Mel Gibson on Hacksaw Ridge, and kind of like having good things to say about Mel Gibson, which is not a thing that Hollywood generally tends to do. And like rehabilitating old white men is not like high on the priority list for like anyone except those people themselves. So I'm really wondering if there's kind of like like people have looked at you in like a specific way, or have kind of looked away from you because you don't have this kind of branding, and this will fit in. I'm not saying, I'm cynically saying like he did all of this just because he's kind of anticipating bad press for something, or he's trying to like redefine himself because of that. But I do believe that there is certainly value in positioning yourself as a kind of like sensitive leading man type of person.
I just had this thought that because Tom Hanks is my favorite rom-com leading man. besides Hugh, it's tough. I don't know. I couldn't decide, but he's kind of positioning himself as a Tom Hanksy type character, in that he's very emotionally available. He's very approachable. He likes to talk about his feelings. He does a variety of different types of roles. And there hasn't really been a big Hollywood actor, in a really long time. I mean, we still have George Clooney and Brad Pitt doing movies because we don't know what else to do, because there's this vacuum of leading.
Tom Cruise.
Yeah, like what? And we've tried to make Glenn Powell work. I don't think it's working. I mean, like, I salute Glenn Powell. I wish him the best. I have no ill feelings, but I don't think he has the gravitas to be like the leading man in Hollywood. And so this does sort of feel like Andrew Garfield's big coming out as like the guy. He's at the age, he's 41. That's like prime leading man age. And I don't know. I think there is something to be said about this all being part of a larger story, but not to say that none of it is genuine.
And what is also interesting to me, because like I also talked obviously to various friends about this now in the past few days, and we also like realized, okay, what have we actually seen Andrew Garfield in? Like, and it turned out not that many things. Like, I was lucky enough to see him do Angels in America on Broadway, which was a life-changing experience. As also a recording of it. Then like we watched at some point, but like that is obviously a big deal. But like not many people will have seen it because it was live theater and it was in the London West End and it came to Broadway. But like in terms of like, okay, yeah, he was Academy Award nominated, but like, looking back on, like, there aren't like 50 different things you've seen Andrew Garfield in. Yes, he was Spider-Man, but like there were various, and he was, I think, was the least popular one in so many ways, because he was sort of wedged in between the MCU becoming a thing and the Tobey Maguire that was sort of a very popular like early 2000s iteration of it, and the big live action iteration of it for this generation. So there isn't much. I mean, I loved him in Tick, Tick, Boom, but that also still feels like a very niche sort of like a nerd thing, even though it was on Netflix. And yeah, it's like, so maybe that's, yeah, as you said, like he's shifting into like leading man mode, and there's sort of a rom-com renaissance going on seemingly. So this is like definitely the moment for him to like, let's do this, and let's see how his actual movie is going to do now. But
I just realized I haven't seen an Andrew Garfield movie.
Yeah, I haven't seen Hacksaw Ridge. I don't care about Hacksaw.
I haven't seen Hacksaw Ridge. I've seen the latest Spider-Man, where it was all of them, where he was in that. I probably saw one of the early ones when they came out or soon thereafter, and I think I caught bits of him in like things where he didn't have huge roles, but not like, I've never gone to the cinema going like, oh, the new Andrew Garfield movie is out. No, not like the new Tom Hanks movie, not like the new Brad Pitt or George Clooney movie. And it really does make sense that you would position yourself as like, I could be that leading man. You're having a renaissance of rom-coms, and I am not just like the leading man. I'm also kind of British, so like that's gonna work. Like I'm like a Hugh Grant, Tom Hanks, like mixture
together.
I'm perfect for this. And now I'm just kind of like in my head imagining what would have worked differently about anyone but you if it had just been Andrew Garfield instead of Glenn Powell. Change nothing else. If he has the kind of quality that would make that even work, if that's again like chemistry, as we've seen with How to Lose a Guy, like is very subjective. But I would wager it would have worked better.
And what does a leading man need? A leading lady. And Amelia is kind of the perfect person for this moment, because Andrew does not have a social media presence. He doesn't have that audience on lock. So he kind of brings the old Hollywood piece of it. And then Amelia is so online and has this incredible audience that has just like probably quadrupled overnight. And so he, being with her, he accesses a whole different audience, a younger audience. I forgot. I didn't realize he was 41 actually before the date. I looked it up.
I thought he was in his 30s. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, and that's also something that has come up. Most of the comments I've seen are, he's 41. But I think that's also
That hurts me personally.
he looked so much younger. Like, he was actually believable almost as this teenage Spider-Man when he was playing him, because he looked so much younger. And I think also I want to say I would be very okay if the rom-com renaissance is led by apparently Brett Goldstein, which I've been rooting for the whole time, and it seems to be happening. He has 2 rom-coms coming out that he also wrote. And Andrew
all my British guys. Yeah, I love them.
I'm fine with that. And I mean, the cool thing about Amelia obviously also is that she doesn't, like, she's gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but like, she's not the Hollywood, like, she's not Sydney Sweeney. She's
a real person.
This is part of the thing that I also thought, like, because they're both, like, you put these people out there, nobody in their right mind would say, oh, these aren't very attractive people, but you put them next to like Hollywood stars, other Hollywood stars, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, those are different. These people are different. Like, and like, maybe it's kind of like the British, like the more real, like, British movies tend to embrace kind of like more like character type people. Maybe it's that, but that I think also is something that makes people connect. Like, if Sydney Sweeney had the comedic timing and the delivery and persona of Amelia Dimoldenberg, I still don't think that would work.
Well, isn't that sort of like the Tom Hanks model, right? Like, he's not a classic heartthrob. People love him because you could imagine going on a date with him, and you can imagine marrying him and like maybe kissing him, but he's not like this like sexual powerhouse. You're not like, oh, I mean, I guess for some people, whatever you're into. But for me personally, that's not the feeling that overwhelms me when I watch Tom Hanks. I want to be like held by him,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so I think that's the same sort of thing that Andrew, he had a moment, I think, where he was trying to be a heartthrob, and it didn't quite work because he, for whatever reason, I don't know. I mean, he's a very attractive guy, but he's like, oh, maybe now that I'm a little older, a little wiser, I'm more grounded. He's suffered this profound loss of his mother. Maybe he's kind of ready for that next act where he's like, I'm going to be this more approachable figure. I don't know. I'm curious to see.
I mean, also down to the thing that he chose to wear on date, which felt like the most kind of, I mean, this is like very, I don't want to use British as like a explains it term for everything.
Sure.
Yeah, no, but like it's not, it felt kind of at the same time very dressed down and very old Hollywood at this, like in the way, especially if you see him in those promo shots with like the pants that he's wearing, that feels almost like out of the 40s. So yeah, there is clearly also in that some positioning going on.
He looks like Ryan Gosling in La La Land.
Yeah, which is that era, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he looks like he just wants to, sweep her off her feet. Look very kind of casual, but like that's a date outfit. He thought a lot about that.
It's only casual because you spent like an hour and a half thinking about making it perfect. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, he looked perfect. Her outfit, so it was interesting to me.
It's very interesting, especially since like it was kind of like, it ended up being like on the promo pictures, people were like, oh, this is quite the revealing outfit. Did not register for me when I was watching the date, which is weird, which is very strange.
Yeah,
the skirt is so short, right?
Yeah, we're sitting down. Okay, yeah, that is fair.
But I feel like it was sort of like, it was very, for people who haven't seen it, it was super low cut button down shirt. Like her whole chest is basically bare. But then the rest of her is covered. And it kind of made perfect sense for their date though. She's like, there's so much, you see so much, but there's so much you don't see too.
Ooh, yeah, that's deep. I like that. That's kind of
yeah. It was actually, and the one thing without falling down too many rabbit holes that I want to turn to again is sort of the specter of queerness with so with her we already said like, what is it if she goes on a date with Billie Eilish at least is very openly queer now, and so on and so forth, but with him too, because I distinctly remember, I think there was some discussion even when he was Spider-Man that he might be bisexual or maybe not, and he's neither really confirmed nor denied. And then obviously again he was Prior Walter in Angels in which doesn't have to mean anything, but it's still like it is a very pivotal like role, like, queer role you can take. And you know, and then it's Jonathan Larson and Tick Tick Boom, and Jonathan Larson himself wasn't queer, but he's surrounded by queer people and he lived in it, so it's always there. And I think that's also an interesting sort of like there's that certain sensibility about him that is sometimes attributed to being queer because he's not this like strong man, masculine. He's not Glenn Powell. I mean, there's a whole other spectrum of queerness that comes back into that, but like, you know, it's still just a sense of being sensitive and like having this very different masculinity of being in touch with your feelings. And again, like speaking of chemistry, seriously, I've not seen it. This is the next rabbit hole I want people to fall down to, is find the interview where he's on Colbert and he kisses Stephen Colbert because they have chemistry. I kid you not. And it's like hot. You know, it's seriously hot.
Googling right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Stephen Colbert is, for all intents and purposes, as far as I know, heterosexual. He definitely has been married to the same woman for a very long time in any case. But yeah, you know, and I think that is also like an interesting kind of,
Which actually,
actually, who did he kiss when he didn't win an award? Was it Ryan Gosling or Ryan Reynolds? That is part of that interview.
They've all kissed at some point.
Okay, I just want to say, like I said in one of our earlier podcasts, I can never tell Ryan Reynolds and Ryan Gosling apart, and you told me you can always tell them apart. Now you don't know.
I can definitely tell them. I love Ryan Gosling.
I don't remember because I think the thing was one of them won and the other didn't.
Okay.
Kiss the one that didn't, and they were all there, so they were.
Yeah. The thing that I was thinking about here is like, again, with the old kind of old Hollywood, where like half of these people are closeted in old Hollywood, like, and there's kind of like a Rock Hudson energy to this potentially, like this just barely hidden, or like it's to the point where the whole like idea of gaydar is like at this point, so that there's like shows on YouTube where actual queer people like look at a row of people and like try to figure out if they're queer or not, and like half the time they're wrong. So like this is a thing that you could easily play with in when it is something that you want to put out there. So and maybe especially since he has the chemistry with Colbert, and like he also does have a good amount of chemistry with Florence Pugh. I haven't seen the movie. The movie sounds bonkers, so I'm not entirely sure I need to see it. But like again, in their interviews, they had some chemistry. If he's just kind of a person who understands how to produce chemistry with more people than others can, like if that's just a thing that he can do, and now he's leveraging it.
Yeah, but I think it is with Amelia beforehand, you know, a couple of years ago when they first met, there was no reason for him to leverage her.
No.
And so that's what I think what kind of brings it back to feeling much more genuine than a co-star relationship.
Yeah.
Because it's like, but yeah, I mean, they address this on the chicken chop date. Like, why haven't they gone out before? You know, why didn't he ever call her up and just say, hey, let's meet in Notting Hill for coffee, you know?
Like,
when you say nothing at all.
And I get interested, right? She's like, you have my number. And he's like, do I? Yeah, you asked for it at a party. So it also seems like this clearly misconnection where maybe he was just like genuinely dating someone else, but now he's no longer. And she's also like, well, when they're like, oh, it was vibey, right? It's like, oh yeah, you avoided me for 2 years because you could take what was going. You know, like that would be also the other rom-com trope of like you meet at the wrong time and then you sort of wait for the other person or both of you to become available, and like now maybe it's time. And they certainly at least play with that quite clearly. And again, the red carpet thing to me is still genuine because you say like, what would have been the reason they would have had to orchestrate this?
Yeah, no, there's no way.
No, and it was just so genuinely awkward. And like when he goes, oh, I always want to see you, and she's like, what? that wasn't the end of the sentence. I always want to see you in these kinds of sort of things.
But then he immediately again like produces kind of that physical closeness, because there's really very few ways in which you can do that in a red carpet situation, and he just like starts holding the same microphone as she does, and the same way that he does in the chicken shop date reel at some point, like with that weird kind of like it turned and the awkward high five, and then immediately makes a jokey kind of like reply about it because it didn't quite work with the timing. But there is clearly like he's clearly trying to establish a rapport, whether that's like a genuine thing like or like a romantic interest. That's different. I do believe it is, like at least to the point where like he's open to exploring it. Like if he's probably not going to be like, you know, devastated if nothing comes of it, but like to the point where like, oh, why not? Let's give this a shot. Like so many relationships actually do start that way, and then like either turn sour or turn into lifelong partnerships or anything in between. So
yeah, I do think there was a lot of Britishness that lost on me in America. Because the whole thing was them sort of insulting each other. And I was like, I mean, if a British person tells me that is really truly how it's done, and that is an example of a successful first date, I believe you, because there are a lot of American conventions that probably don't translate. But I was very, like I said, acutely aware of him trying to have the power in this situation, because he's probably used to having the power in most rooms that he walks into, and she would not let him. And I thought that was really cool, because she is a self-made woman. This is her turf, and she was like, no, you're not going to pull on over on me. You're not going to win this date, whatever that means. And I think that dynamic is actually really cool. It's like not the leading man and like the little lady on his arm. It's a leading man, and then this sort of leading, I mean, she's not an actor, but like leading in her own right, in her own field. And they're kind of positioning them as equals, even though he's so much more famous than her at this point, which I mean, good for her.
Which, I mean, that also might change. Like it might just flip, depending on how things go. It also kind of Shakespearean, right? Like in a way, like the kind of banter, which I guess is very British.
Yeah, but like mutual rose is definitely very British, or like also extends to other European things. But it's like, yeah, I mean, I feel like there's, again, what works for them is also the recognizability for some of us, for the like the awkwardness that is there, and that seems very genuine. Even with the, like, again, the awkward high five has definitely been there, and you hold on too long, and then what are you gonna do? And like and there's actually this moment where she kind of, I think, tries to get power back by like sort of like removing her hand from this, and it's like the literal push and pull between them. And I think that is the thing.
Was that the part where she said he was messing up the microphone?
Oh, that was
yeah.
It's like getting agitated, and it's like, I think the ketchup bottle or something on the table.
Yeah. She's like, no, don't move that. You're literally messing up the sound.
It's like, I don't want to do that. I want to be mindful. It's like,
which I think is actually kind of like the perfect encapsulation of the push and pull power relationship. Like he wants to be respectful, but he also doesn't want to give anything up. And so like it takes her calling him on it for him to go like, oh yeah, no, I should probably not be doing that. And the thing that I again kept coming back to, why are people calling this a rom-com, is a lot to do with the way that this is presented as basically kind of like cut scenes from like a longer movie that is constructed around that, right? With, you know, now we're talking about marriage and do you want kids? Now we're talking about how private are you? Now we're talking about, does this matter to you? Does this matter to you? And then in the end, which was basically almost like the scene out of When Harry Met Sally, where like he says, or she says, are we going to be friends now? And he says yes, and then she basically says like, oh, did I just friend zone this? Which is like literally the scene in When Harry Met Sally when she opens up to Billy Crystal, basically like almost asking him on a date, and he doesn't understand it. He misses it after he was very much into her in the beginning of the movie, and then it kind of like defaults to the friend zone. but then it goes on from that. So that also then has its precedent in very well-known romantic comedies.
Like I said, this is a trailer for their relationship. The more we talk about it, the more I'm like, because that's a really good point, that it feels like these are just clips of something much larger. Like I don't actually feel like I sat in on a date with them. I feel like I got parts of a date, and then they're keeping a lot of it behind the scenes. And so it's like, this is just the beginning.
And it's not real in the same sense that, like, we're used to listening to conversations now on podcasts that go on for an hour, like all of these podcasts. Like this one. And people kind of like defining their relationship, talking about how they relate to the world and to each other. We get 11 minutes, right? We don't get the hour. And that's the format of the show, but also we don't get like a cut scene. We don't get like the extra long version for like the Patreon. We don't get any of that. We just get this because that's what the format is. And the format matters more than what's going on.
And they could have easily broken the format for this because it was so hotly anticipated. She could have made it half an hour. People would have watched 2 hours, but they made a conscious decision. Like, the show is still the show. We're not going to break that, even if you're Andrew Garfield.
Yeah. And I feel like since we've also talked almost for an hour, we can sort of now rate together if this is a rom-com or not.
Yes, that's the question we always ask of any movie. What do you think, Marisa?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think by now it's also consciously constructed as one, but even before that, I was rooting for them. So like, I'm still rooting for them.
Yeah.
And in any case, even if they're never going to date in real life, kudos to them and their PR team for making us this invested and,
Which in the end is kind of what we want out of media, right? As lovers of rom-coms, like, it's almost not that important that it's real, like, to the story. So well done. And this is a rom-com. Is it the best one of 2024? We might still have some to come. It's definitely better than half of the things that Netflix has put out there lately. So that's what I'll say.
Do you guys want to hear something exciting?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah. I'm working on a rom-com script.
I wrote one like 25 years ago. And then like when I was working at some point in film in Germany, and then I stopped doing that and becoming a professor, but like you absolutely very interested in hearing what, and if any of this conversation or of the tropes that we've discussed filter into it.
Yeah. This is really helpful, just helping me work out some of the characters. It's still like in the early-ish phase, but it's a holiday rom-com. But it's about, I know I've mentioned being Jewish a few times, but like, I am Jewish, and that's a big part of my work and what I write about. And so it's a Hanukkah rom-com, and it's the usual trope of, the city girl goes to the country, that whole thing. It's flipped. The city girl moves to the country and comes back to the city for the holidays, and realizes that like actually city life is where her moral center is. And so I'll keep you updated.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Are you gonna pitch it to Hallmark?
I want to go a little bit bigger than
Netflix.
Okay. Seems like the logical.
Where you can get away with a nude scene or cursing.
Yeah, but I do want to keep it like pretty close to a traditional rom-com, and not because I feel like some of them push it just because they can now on Netflix. So they're going to be a little more raunchy just because, and if it serves the plot, sure, but I don't necessarily think that's necessary unless there's a true reason. But then Hallmark, on the other hand, is like so sanitized and like who talks like that. So I want it to be very much real people, but in the vein of a Tom Hanks kind of situation.
Do you want to leave this in the episode for the public that you're working on?
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe one day we'll come back to it and the movie will be a huge hit.
Yes.
And you heard it here first.
If you make it to a red carpet for your movie, I hope Amelia or she stars in it.
Yes. Oh my God.
Full circle. Like,
Honestly, I could see both of them in the movies, so that would be.
Like this is a pitch now.
They just have to do American accents, and as long as they do that.
So I mean, Andrew is really good in American accents, so
Yeah.
I'm sure she can pull it off.
Something to think about.
You're going to find out if you have chemistry with Amelia Dimoldenberg. So that's going to be interesting.
We'll check back in 2 years. Let's see.
All right, let's do that. And I think we should also maybe put like a pin in this to continue this conversation if there's more of the lore that comes out. So maybe like in a year we'll have like a kind of like look back at the year in Andrew Garfield and Amelia Dimoldenberg or something. I don't know.
I love that. I'm in.
All right. I think I'm reaching the same point as the chicken shop date reached, where I realize we have to end this, but I don't know how. So, if any of you have ideas,
I can tell people where to find me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So if you want to read my work, my newsletter / website, it's called The Handbasket. It's thehandbasket.co, not handbaskets.co. That's some weird like satanic shop or something. Literally. So thehandbasket.co, and then on Blue Sky or Threads, it's just my name, Marisa Kabas, and drop me a line, talk about romcoms or whatever else.
Yeah. Thank you.
And yeah, if you're a person working for Hollywood who somehow like ends up with this podcast, then we pick up her script.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
cast them both in it.
Exactly.
Yes, you have a lot to work with here.
All right. Thank you very much, Marisa, for being our very first guest and being on our very first live reaction special episode ever.
Can you explain the meaning of the title of your podcast?
Oh yeah, Sabrina, you want to go?
So it's a line from When Harry Met Sally. Where they're in, what is it? What's the store called? Sharper Images?
It's Sharper Images, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, where they do the karaoke machine, and then his ex-wife comes in with her new husband Ira, and is like, one day, and then he like loses it after.
In front of Ira.
One day, I'm gonna sing "Sorry" with a fringe on top in front of Ira. So yeah.
Oh my God, I'm actually mad I didn't get that. That's
It's the shibboleth for the rom-com lovers, and you just like put it out there.
nice.
All right.
Well, thank you too for having me. This was so much fun.